Hi, I'm Annie Gedger, and I'm the only one whose husband died while I was 6 months pregnant. What happened to us is what happened. It doesn't define me, right? I feel really strongly about that. And I never wanted it to be something Jake found out later. So from the time Jake came into the world, I showed him pictures of Kent. We talked about him. I told stories about him. Anytime Jake would do something similar to Kent, I would say, "Oh, that's so much like your dad." I called him Dad Kent from the time Jake was little because I wanted him to know that it was Kent's intention to be his father, right? And that Kent would have loved to be his dad and to love him and to be with him physically, not just this swirling energy of him that would come in.
My name is Laura Cathcart Robbins, and I am the only one in the room, but I'm never the only one in this room because, as usual, my boyfriend, producer, and co-host, Scott Slaughter, who I call Hun, is here as well.
Hi, honey.
Hey, Hun. So, like I said before, we're talking to Annie Gedger. Annie, where are you talking to us from? Are you in Portland?
I'm in Portland, Oregon.
Yes. Hi.
Hi.
Welcome to the show.
Thank you. I'm so delighted to be here.
Yeah, I'm really happy. Kelly Wallace was the one who connected us. Kelly was one of our most downloaded episodes. Do you remember the title of her episode, Hon?
I don't have it offhand.
But it's a really compelling episode. She talks about her grandfather who is responsible for molesting her. And she actually ended up in trial when she was, I think, 8 years old. He was on trial and she had to testify. It's one of those episodes that you're just riveted and you can't stop listening to it. And she is continuing to talk about her journey. I'm really glad that she came on our show to talk, and I'm really glad that she connected us, Annie.
I am too.
I was thinking when she sent me the email connecting the two of us about Melissa Gould. Do you know who she is?
Gould. Yes, I do.
Yeah.
Melissa Gould.
Yeah. So we interviewed her. She has a book called Widowish, where she was a young widow with a young child. And she actually lived in our old neighborhood.
Wow.
She kind of walked over to our interview because
that's great.
She was really close. And that was really one of the first stories I'd heard about someone who was widowed young on our podcast. And that was really interesting to me. But yours adds another layer because you were 6 months pregnant when your husband died. Right?
That's correct. And I was only 28 at the time.
You were only 28. Yeah, which is really young.
Really young.
It's just my older son is 26 and I can't imagine him having that type of life experience in 2 years, you know?
It's so true. I mean, when it happened and people would say, "Oh, you're so young." You know, when you're the 28-year-old, you don't feel that young. I mean, I'd been married 3 years. We just bought a house. My teaching life was taking off. But then in retrospect, like I have 2 kids, my son who I was pregnant with when my first husband died, and my beautiful daughter with my second husband. And when they each turned 28, I was so, like that was just startling to me to look at them and think, oh my gosh, I was so young when it happened.
Yeah. I'm totally with you. And I just want to talk a little bit about, I want to start with from the beginning rather, but I want to talk a little bit about what we're talking about. And so in The Fifth Chamber, which is your debut memoir, right? Your first memoir. It came out in September of 2023.
Yeah, that's
right.
Yeah.
So in the book, you're 6 months pregnant with your first child. You're married to your beloved husband. And he dies in a car accident on a mountain road. And you have to navigate single motherhood while you're mourning and then eventually learning, well, not eventually, even in real time, learning to love again, because you learn to love your son. And then later, your husband, who you mentioned. You divide that book into lots of sections of before and after, which I loved. I loved the style which you wrote the book. It's really such a beautiful book. It's the way you write it is really exquisite, and it lets the reader really feel what or I shouldn't say it lets the reader, it let me in on what you were feeling, and it made sense of it in a way, something that doesn't make sense. You allowed me to make sense of it when I was reading your words.
Thank
So
you. That's a huge compliment.
oh, you're so welcome. Um, you start with after in the book. There's a prologue, and then you start with after. And I just thought maybe you write about Kent. You say that he was 6 foot, 200 pounds, swimming pool, blue eyes, cleft chin, steely gray hair. This man carved from the Colorado mountains. Can you tell us about him?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I love that you just read that part because like he'll always be so visual for me. He continues to be present in my life. I think that's part of so much a part of what I learned on my grief journey is, well, of course he's not here and my life has moved on in beautiful ways. He's still present in my life. He carved from the Colorado mountains. He grew up in Colorado. He had a steadiness about him, which is why I describe him that way. I always say that like he was the water to my fire, which is also true of my husband, Scott. I just was very drawn to that steadiness in him, and he had the most incredible blue eyes I've ever seen on a human being before or since. And if I ever see them like that again, I'm pretty sure I'll faint.
Yeah. Yeah. That's awesome. I mean, your description of him was awesome. And I loved, you say that actually toward the end of the book. I don't know if you're reiterating it, but you say the bluest eyes I've seen before or since. So you and Kent met, you're both what I call outdoorsy. You think that's accurate, but it not, doesn't sound like you are you hunters? Were you hunters?
No, just very serious backpackers, skiers. We did backcountry skiing. So you ski in with your pack on. You know, we made ice caves and we backpacked in the summer too. But we were definitely outdoors people.
Yeah, yeah, and
You're my
Scott's,
people, by the
I'm
way.
about to say you're a Scott's people. When I tell people that Scott's an outdoorsman, they immediately think hunting, and I'm like, no, he was
No.
skiing, rock climber, mountain biker. You know, like he did all that. He's the first one who told me about backcountry skiing. I'd never heard of it.
Right.
Yeah.
She's my city mouse, by the way.
I am Annie. I'm a lover of the great indoors.
You are.
Oh my gosh.
I am. I love everything about being inside. And so we are definitely fire and ice in many ways because we are pulled in opposite directions and we're still pulled toward each other as well.
That's beautiful.
Yeah.
I used to say that I did not come from a family of backpackers. It's just something I always knew I wanted to do, right? Like even skiing. And I think I mentioned it in the book, like I learned to ski by going up on a ski bus when I was 10 years old.
Yeah.
I always said about my dad's idea of nature was seeing a tree outside the window of the Hilton. So
yes, that's me.
He would get you.
He would totally get me. So you met Kent, you were both outdoors people, and then tell us what happened next.
I'll tell you what happened next. Well, we were married for 3.5 years.
Well, before you were married, though, he was almost divorced, right?
Oh, that's true. I wasn't sure which next part you're asking me about.
Sorry.
That's okay. That's okay. Yeah, actually, when we met, he was in the process of getting divorced. And I was, as I write about, like I was really conflicted about that. Having grown up in a family where my parents divorced, that just was, I wasn't interested in dating somebody who wasn't clearly already single. But he was pretty irresistible to me. And while we were dating and getting more involved and he was on his way to getting divorced, his wife died in a car accident on a mountain road. And it was, I actually recently interviewed somebody who had a similar experience. It's really uncommon. Here was this person that I was pretty sure I was going to be with. And now he's widowed, and had his own grief to process. And that's when I think I was so young. I was like 23, 24 at the time. And I did my best. And he like, it's part of why I'm so passionate about people sharing their grief and talking about it and getting it out of them. He pretty much kept it to himself. I would ask him about it once in a while, but it was really rare that he even talked about her. But I knew there would be times he was extra protective of me. And that's when I would ask him if he was thinking about his first wife, because he didn't want to lose me.
Right. And also, I mean, I don't know statistically how common it is for the widow who has lost his wife, even though they were getting a divorce in a car crash on a mountain road, to then become married to somebody who will become widowed by the same accident, not the same accident, but also by losing him to a car crash on a mountain road. Statistically, that almost seems impossible to me. And you talk a little bit about that.
It does.
In the
I mean,
book.
I'm like in the Venn diagram of how people die and all the things.
Yeah.
I think I'm in a really tiny, maybe I'm your only one in the room. I think I'm in a really small group that way. And I wrote about it. And Scott, my beautiful husband, there was a point where I looked at him and I'm like, are you sure you want to be with me? Because here's what happened. Kent had his first wife. She died in a car accident. He married me. He died in a car accident. And I would have this weird, like, am I going to be next? And then I thought, like, no, that's an even smaller statistic, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. And I love that scene where you're kind of offering Scott an out because you just don't know, is this really a thing, right? Or is the possibility greater because this is happening in your life? And then he talks about the world according to Garp, right?
Yeah.
But I don't want to get too far ahead. I don't want to get to Scott yet. I want to, can you tell us how Kent died? Like what that right before he died, that evening before he went out, and then what happened?
The evening before he went out, he went with me to my 6-month pregnancy appointment. And we had always, like, I was still skiing because I was a good skier. My doctor said it was okay for me to ski. And it would startle people, right, to see me on my skis with my pregnant belly. But I didn't go obviously I did not go that night. I didn't go because I had a huge stack of papers to grade and I was tired, like pregnant tired. And I'd rather ski on the weekend and not at night, all the things. So he went with me to that last appointment and we said goodbye in the parking lot. And that is definitely a scene in my book and it lives in my cells. I will always hold that because I mean, all this time later and for years now, I have a lot of gratitude for the fact that I really got to hug my husband and tell him how much I loved him. And while I didn't think it was the last time, it turned out to be the last time. But I've always known all these years, there was no doubt that he knew how I felt about him and I knew how he felt about me. And that was a little bit of grace in my life.
Yeah. I mean, and you write about that so beautifully. I was very impacted by that scene where you're saying goodbye. Did you have a sense of maybe you shouldn't go?
Absolutely. And and that's in there. I just had this really inky feeling that he shouldn't go. And
had you had it before?
Yeah, I mean, like my intuition is really good, right? And I had those body feelings of like, he shouldn't go. He should stay home. And he felt really strongly about, he wanted to get in as much skiing as he could before the baby got here. We all know life changes once the baby's here. But I really wanted him to stay home. And I really had to wrestle with, do I let him go? I knew if I pleaded with him to stay home that he would, right? And so for quite a while after he died, that was hard for me because I really had that, as most people do, when there's a tragedy, when there's a sudden illness, an accident, you go through all the what ifs and if onlys. And for quite a while, I was convinced had I begged him to stay home, he would have. And then my life would have taken a different course. But I didn't. And that I definitely, and this isn't in the book, but I'll tell you, like, I don't think it's in there. When he died, or the timing was so, like, I felt him. I knew something happened. I knew something happened. I felt him leave. And when that, so that a chaplain came to my house late at night, middle of the night. And when I opened the door, I knew that Kent was dead, because chaplains don't come in the middle of the night for no reason. And as we were talking, he'd asked me, like, did you have a premonition? Because I told him, like, and I was trying to figure out the time of the accident, because I knew when I had just those whole body chills, and that something was really, really, really shifted in my universe. So, yeah.
You in the book, you say that you didn't want to let the chaplain in.
Yeah, I did not.
Because then it would be real.
Right.
You also say, you quote Kent as saying, you can't live your life in a box.
Yeah.
And it sounded like the philosophy by which he lived.
It was totally his motto, right? Yeah. If I'd had a headstone for him, I would have put it on there, because he said it all the time. And then after he died, I had to remind myself all the time that I can't live my life in a box. Not in the beginning. In the beginning, all I wanted to do is live in a box and keep everybody I loved in my box. But you can't stay there.
I have a friend, I think her son's 22 now, but when she was pregnant with him, her father was dying, and they were very close. And I remember her turning to me, she was around 7 months pregnant, and saying, I need to get this baby out of me, because this grief is killing me, and I don't want to pass it on to my son. Tell me what happened, next. Like, you were now 6 months pregnant. You've gotten this news. I know what you wrote in the book, but tell our listeners what happened next.
Well, it's devastating, and it's inconceivable. And it was just so surreal. I mean, I felt like so many people do in their early grief, I just felt like I was underwater all the time. And it's just the oddest body feeling, right? Plus I was pregnant, where I both always felt like I was covered in fuzz, like I was always in moss. And I also felt like I was skinless, right? Like my insides were showing on the outside, and I was just walking around fully exposed. It was really, really hard. And I worried about the baby. Yet my grief was so overwhelming. I really resonate with your friend saying that, right? Because it was overwhelming. My grief was overwhelming, and I couldn't just put it on pause for 3 months. But in a way, I will absolutely say, and I've said it so many times, in some ways I got to just a little bit, right? So that whole, while I don't believe in the 5 stages of grief, I believe in before and after. The numbness of early grief, that for me honestly lasted until Jake was born. So I always think that was like my body taking care of me and taking care of him, that I really didn't get the bigger impact until after he was here.
Whew. I'm sorry, I got distracted because I really wanted to hear what you were saying, and I was worried that it was going to jettison our recording. But you were saying that you really identify it with what my friend said. But you got a reprieve, or not a reprieve, but you had some time. Is that what you said?
Well, so it didn't feel like it in the process. Like, I mean, I cried hard and long, and I had this, I mean, I cried everywhere. And at the same time, I didn't, in hindsight, I don't think I felt the bigness of my loss until Jake was born, because that's when it started to feel real to me. Up until then, those first 3 months, I was pretty sure Kent was going to walk in the door. I was pretty sure I was going to, like, I'd wake up in the morning. It's the oddest thing in a huge loss. Like, you wake up in the morning, and for this very brief amount of time, life is normal.
Yeah.
Right. And I'd have this moment like, oh, and he always got up before me. So waking up and him not being in the bed wasn't startling. And then I would
Right.
remember and it would come crashing. However, it's hard for me to articulate it, but there was to some degree, I didn't have the full impact until after Jake came. And I do think that was my brain taking care of my body and taking care of the baby, because it
Yeah.
was just too much for it to be real while I was growing this beautiful life.
Wow. I mean, to think that the psyche and the body could work together that way, on almost without your consent or permission or input, you know, just to keep you going, like life support,
Yeah.
you know, like literal life support. And you describe grief as sinking to the bottom of this cold, dark ocean, like the blackness. And I haven't had that experience, but I could feel that. I could feel like the absence of any warmth, right? And then the absence of light and the heaviness that it must feel like, you know, where it's everything, the ocean's on top of you instead of floating, you know,
Yeah,
which
no,
is what
it's not
people usually.
floating.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
is.
it's
That was for me like sitting on the bottom and just
yeah,
that. And that's the darkest dark.
yeah.
There is no light.
Mm-mm.
And it is like grief feels very heavy. You know, the old fashioned term for depression is boulders on your chest, stones on your chest. Right. And
Yeah.
that really is what it feels like.
The your obstetrician obviously knew in real time what was happening, right?
Yeah.
But your pediatrician did not,
No, he did
right?
not.
So because I saw that you wrote "dead dad" on the paperwork.
Yeah.
Can you tell us about making that? Tell us about your son's Jake's birth and what that was like, and then moving into that new phase. Because, like, I remember when Miles, my oldest son, was born, and I went to the pediatrician's office, and they're like, mother's maiden name, blah blah blah. I put in all my mother stuff. It didn't
Oh,
occur to me that I was the mother.
oh, I love that.
So I mean, and that was like, I was married, you know, everything was fine. He was there with me. And still there was that split, you know, that separation from reality. So tell me about yours. Tell me about the birth and then moving into this new world as Jake's mom.
Well, thank goodness my beautiful younger sister was my birth coach. She stepped in to coach me. She was only 23. It's her first live birth. And she was
Wow.
like just beautiful and right there with me through all of it. My family was all with me. I mean, thank goodness that we can have everybody in the room. I was not the only one in the room at that point.
Right.
I had
Yeah.
lots of company. And it was, so here's the funny thing with his birth, and this is not in the book. Well, you know, I wouldn't go to a birth class because the idea of sitting in a room with other people with their intact, I couldn't do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
I found a woman who gave me private lessons. So I had private lessons with my sister and this beautiful midwife who I don't remember her name. So, you know, I was somewhat prepared. But in my head, I was also like, how bad can childbirth hurt? I mean, come on. I've had the worst pain I could imagine.
Yeah.
How bad could it be? And then I started having the baby and I found out, oh, this is a whole different kind of pain. At one point, one of the nurses came in and looked me in the eye and very serious and calm and asked, did you take a birth class? Because apparently I was sort of
You
out
were
of
not acting
control.
like it.
I forgot
Yes.
everything. And I was just, oh
Yeah.
my gosh. And my sister was like, yeah, we did. But, you know, and by then, like my family had told everybody in the hospital. So everybody there knew. They weren't like, where's the dad coming in? Which that was super helpful.
Yes.
But yeah, so I managed to get him into the world. And in the delivery room, this will make me cry. My sister was with me and my mom, which was just such a beautiful thing. And, you know, we're at a hospital and the rules were you get one person. But my OBGYN, who'd known me since I was 18 and who I adored, he's like, oh, yeah, your mom can come in too. So in the actual delivery, I had both my sister and my mom. And then this tiny, beautiful boy, when he was born, and all that's in the book, he had the umbilical cord around his neck. So when he was born, he was not moving and he was blue. And I had a terror I'd never experienced before. And all I could think was, I was praying hard, because like if I had lost him too, I was pretty sure that I was done. And then my doctor just took that off his neck and he started breathing and he pinked up and cried, and it was such a beautiful moment. It was so perfect that out of this hard, dark place in my life, then here's this beautiful crying, breathing boy on my chest. And you know, newborns, they like wobble their head and they look up at you. And that was the beginning of me like, oh, there's this instant love for your child. He was my first. I hadn't experienced that before.
Yeah. And I just want to acknowledge that not everybody does have that. I had it. And it's a gift.
It is.
I think it's really a gift to have that instant love for your child. And I'm so glad you had that gift.
Me too.
In that moment, right?
Yeah.
And then, so this is a huge, tremendous, momentous time when a baby is born. And there's hormones rushing through your body, and there's people around, and you're kind of nested and feeling warm and cared for. What happens when you go home?
Well, my mom drove us home, right? And she was so sweet about it. And she said when she came to pick me up that this was she was sorry that she was the driver. That's what I remember saying. She was sorry that it was her. And I did, I thought it was going to be our first family outing, because when Kent was around, that's what we were already planning. I mean, we were already trying to figure out how old Jake would have to be till we could have him in a backpack and have him outside with us, So going home without him and with my mom taking me, that was really hard. I mean, I'll always be grateful that my family was around and they did what they did, but it was really hard. That was the first, as I said, like it became really real for me in just the most devastating way, that here I'm now back in my house and I have this beautiful little baby and I don't have a husband. And one of the first things I did is show Jake a picture of Kent, and I just started bawling. It's like, this was not the way I wanted you to meet your dad. But this is how you're going to know him, because he can't be here physically. And then I would so often I'd feel Kent around me. Right. And so when Jake was born, I felt Kent. I just would feel him on my collarbones. And when we came home and I'm crying and showing Jake the picture, I would just feel him like come in like this little mini cyclone and just be all around my collarbones. And while I have experienced feeling other people before who have passed, it's never been like that. That his style was clear and prominent.
Yeah. You have two like jet black pages in the middle of your book. And I think it says something like, when people want to know if you're okay or what it feels like, or if there's anything they could, and you're like, this is what it feels like. And it's just 2 pages where your publisher must have used all the ink they had to make those 2 pages black. I loved that. And when I say I love that, I'm please don't think that I'm making light of it at all. I really appreciated that this was the way you were explaining to us what this was like, because this is the thing for me is I don't know what to say. If I were your friend, I don't know if I would have known what to say to you. I have intuition around these things. Sometimes it's off. I don't want to make things worse. So sometimes I err on the side of caution and say nothing or do nothing. And your book feels like a window in to the fact that there's probably nothing I could say that would make it better. But what you were showing me was that the people that surrounded you helped. Would you say that's correct?
Absolutely. I mean, the people who were in that tight inner circle, they held me up, they buoyed me, um, and I, and the other, then people not quite as close. I mean, come on, it's one of the things that I talk about regularly. People say ridiculous things to others around grief, not meaning to. I always knew people meant well, but people say things that just aren't helpful, like all the platitudes. That doesn't help anybody grieving, right?
Yeah.
And so for me, I really did all those years ago. I'm like, I need to have these little cards printed that just say,
Yeah.
I'm not okay. There's nothing you can do, right?
Right.
What you can do for someone is to sit with them and just be
Mm.
with them. And even saying like, I don't know what to say, that's a balm to someone who's grieving. The point is just to be with people and let them tell their story and not to layer your story on top of theirs. Just be with a human, heart to heart.
Mm. Thank you for that. Thank you. Because I think that's really helpful. I want to talk about the year anniversary of Kent's death, but before I do, I wanted to just mention Emily, the therapist, and the widow group that you attended very much against your will. And then, so this heaviness that I read, that was your life. You were powering through for Jake's sake. You were doing things that you didn't even know how you were doing, right?
Right.
For his sake. But your doctor kind of organized you and Emily connecting.
He did. Jake's
The
pediatrician. Yeah.
Yes. And very just like, yeah, you should talk to her. She's easy to talk to. I'm going to have her call you. And you're like,
she's not going to call me.
Agent. You're like, that's weird. Talk about walking into that widows group and what that was like.
Oh boy, the first time I walked in, I was sure I was in the wrong place, right? Because it took everything in me. I'd been seeing Emily on my own, and she was like, "You're ready for this group," and I trusted her. So I went to the first group. I go into the first group, and here's this circle of women, this lovely circle of women, and they're talking and chatting, they're laughing, they look normal. I was like, they look so normal, like they brush their hair. They have on clean clothes, which I didn't always in those days. And I felt so separate from them, so like I didn't belong there, but I also trusted Emily. And so I made myself go. Actually, the first few times I didn't talk. I barely introduced myself. And I've written about it. The first time I went, one of the women in the group, and I'm not going to name her because I changed their names in the book. I want to make sure she's, one of the women announced that she was single and going on a date. And I was like, what are you talking about? I'm going to be widowed forever. How wow. And I did. It was that group, man, that group saved me. I saved myself with that group because I went from judging them to like really looking up to them. Like these women are amazing. And eventually I can be like them. Eventually I'm also going to find joy on the other side. There's going to be a time when I'm going to see myself as single and ready to date. But it sure wasn't when I first met them.
Yeah. And it reminded me, I'll be 16 years sober this summer. And it reminded me a lot of sober support groups, because that's kind of the whole idea. I'll speak for myself. I came in, like just barely dragging myself in, and was able to see these people who would come in the same way, that were now thriving and had full lives and families and could walk in the sunlight, right? Yeah. Where I was, cowering from it at that point. And even though it felt really abrasive at first, but to be able to see that still planted those seeds of hope, and eventually was the path that I followed just by being in that support group.
Yeah, it is. I mean, it's very similar. It's why I'm such a believer in support groups. because when you're at the start of your process, you can look around the circle and it gives you hope. And it might, I mean, for me, like at first it just pissed me off, and then but I was like, nope, I'm staying. There's something for me here. And actually, one of the women from that group for so many years ago is still one of my dearest friends.
Wow.
Yeah.
I love that. Um, Tell us about the year anniversary, because I thought this was particularly, it was very, I don't know, I thought it was really touching what the gathering that happened, and like the shoes by the door. Like just tell us about that year anniversary of his death.
Mm. Well, I did my best. So part for me, grieving was doing my best just to really be honest with how I was feeling and where I was at the time. And I didn't come to it with good skills. I'd grown up in an alcoholic family. I'd learned to stuff my feelings. I'd learned to just always be the light in the room. And then here I had this loss that was so much bigger than me that I had to figure out how to navigate it. And one of my promises to myself was that I was going to be true to myself. And I was like, I was so knocked down. I felt like I didn't have another choice, but it always was a choice. And it is how I navigated my way through. So that first anniversary, I spent it, my mom and my sisters came over. M&Ms were my go-to grief food. One of my sisters literally brought a gift bag full of peanut M&Ms. Like it, and she said she was embarrassed to buy them at the grocery store. She bought so many M&Ms, and she filled this gift, like just dumped them all in the bag. So it just felt like you could keep eating them. It just seemed like there was still so many. And it was just my sisters and me. And, um, I put Kent's shoes back by the door. I sort of staged things like they were when he died. And the months where I felt like he could walk back through the door any moment, it was just really helpful to me. Like I put his running shoes back by the door. I put his favorite tea mug out. I pulled out some chamomile tea. If I'd had the newspaper, if I was still getting the newspaper, then I would have left a newspaper out, because he always read the paper in the morning. Then I would get up to it later. Um, and, I read his favorite poetry and just really spent that day in my pajamas, surrounded by these women I love so fiercely, and my boy. And it went from feeling like a day that I was so worried it was a day I would not be able to get through, right? That marking that first year anniversary just felt like how could I possibly do that? And I didn't know how, but I, like, little by little, I just asked my mom and my sisters to be with me, and that we kind of figured out together. And they were like, whatever you need, we're here. And that's how I got through it. And eventually Jake went to bed and I got tired, and they offered to spend the night. And I was like, I think I'm good. I felt very loved and held, and I hugged him and told him I loved him, and went and wrote in my journal, which is what I did all the time.
I love that you journaled your way through this, and you talk about how actually you do a reverse thing there. I forgot exactly what you wrote, but it was something like writing is healing you, and then you turn it around to I'm healing myself with writing.
Yeah.
Which I was like, yes, Annie, yes, you are. That is brilliant to reframe that as the action you are taking, and not that something is happening to you, but you are happening to something. I have a few questions left. I'm aware of our time. I want to talk about your Scott. So many things that you wrote about your Scott, I feel about my Scott. And that there's one line where you say, that afternoon I chased my sweet Scott, who always cuts the best trail. I'd follow him anywhere. Obviously, this is not an experience I've had, because Scott and I have never been skiing. But like in the metaphor of life,
Right.
my Scott leads the way, especially when it comes to things about intuition, certainly anything with the outdoors. But I'm very pragmatic by the book. I'm a rule follower, and Scott leads with his heart. I lead with my head, and I have learned to trust his heart and follow him that way. it is very comforting to me to have him be that for me. So I wanted to hear a couple of things. I wanted to hear how you explain to Jake who he is and about his dad, and I wanted you to tell us about Scott and the evolution of that relationship, which is now, is it 33 years?
It's 35.
35 years that you've
Yeah.
been married?
Yeah. It'll be
So
30. It'll be 35 this summer.
wow. So yeah, tell us in whatever order you feel is best about Jake learning who he is from you, and then about Scott.
Okay. Jake learning about Kent or learning about Scott?
Yeah, learning about Kent, like
Okay.
learning about his dad
Okay.
and how he is this pretty unique person, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I always talked about him. I never wanted what happened to us is what happened. It doesn't define me, right? I feel really strongly about that. And I never wanted it to be something Jake found out later. So from the time Jake came into the world, I showed him pictures of Kent. We talked about him. I told stories about him. Anytime Jake would do something similar to Kent, I would say, "Oh, that's so much like your dad." I called him Dad Kent from the time Jake was little because I wanted him to know that it was Kent's intention to be his father, right?
Mm.
And that Kent would have loved to be his dad and to love him and to be with him physically, not just this swirling energy of him that would come in. So one of the things that I did when Jake was pretty little, like still in his, I don't know how old he was. Under around a year, I packed a box of Kent's things that I thought would be meaningful for Jake. And at the time that I did it, I just picked objects. I believe that a little bit of us stays behind on the things that we hold and love.
Mm-hmm.
So I picked things to represent Kent as best as I could. So I put in a model of his motorcycle and his baseball mitt from when he was a kid, and his slide rule. He was a physicist and a genius. So I put in some report cards and the really delightful things teachers had said about him. Of course, I put in pictures and diplomas. I put in, he loved goofy t-shirts, so I put in some of his goofy t-shirts. I put in his, he shaved with a straight edge, like most men don't. So I included that. And it was actually one that he had inherited from a grandfather to his dad to him.
Wow.
Right? So Jake has it. He does not shave with it, but it's this beautiful antique. I love that he has it. I put in, so the one of the, like an afterthought, I included his wallet, and I'll always be glad that I included his wallet, because Jake did not open that box until he was in his early 20s. And I would ask him periodically, do you want to open the box? Like, we moved a couple times and here would be the box. And I had like taped it and wrote on it. And every time he was like, nope, not ready. And at one point when he was a teenager, he said, you know, Mom, Dad is my dad, as in Scott. I don't want to hurt your feelings, but I didn't know him, meaning Kent. So I was like, okay, that's true. And someday you're going to want to, which of course that time has come now that he's an adult, and especially now that he's a dad. But when he decided to open the box, he was in his early 20s. We sat down and went through it together. It was a beautiful experience to get to do that with him. We cried a lot. We told a lot of stories, drank a lot of coffee. And when, this is going to make me cry, but when we got to the wallet, Jake asked me if he could carry it. And I said, well, of course, it's yours. Right. And he said, I just need to feel close to him. So he's carried his wallet all these years. The day he got married, he showed it to me that he had the wallet. The night before he got married, I gave him Kent's wedding ring that I'd given Kent. And Jake carried it in his breast pocket on his wedding day. It's really beautiful.
Oh, Annie, that is, I'm unexpectedly welling up. That is really beautiful. It's such a beautiful story. Not just what happened with the wallet and Jake, but that you allowed him his own time and didn't insist on anything. And if it had never happened, it would have never happened. Yeah. But it happened. You knew that there was going to be a time when he would want to.
I knew there'd be a time. I had this image of him like off on his own adventures, and that I knew there'd be a time he would want to know those stories and be able to take them with him.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, that's beautiful. Um, all right. So the last thing, I thought this was really interesting that you talked about your waking life being with Scott and the dream life being with Kent. And I think this was in the beginning. Is that correct?
Yeah.
Um, I completely understand that, but can you explain that to us a little bit?
Well, it's that beautiful, odd challenge in life of like, you don't get over that kind of love and that kind of heartbreak, but you do move forward. That's always what I said. Like, I'm not over this, but I am moving forward. And in my moving forward life, there's Scott. There's this beautiful man who loves me like crazy, who loves my son. We had another baby. Like, when the kids were little and people would meet us, like, you'd meet us and we're just this family, mom and a dad and two kids, and the son looks like the mom and our daughter looks like Scott. So I mean, that happens, right? uh, but there was so much more to our story than that. And I dreamt about Kent. I still dream about him every once in a while, and that is, to me, is partially how he comes to say hi, right? And so early on I had this strong, like, my waking life, there's Scott, but I go to sleep and there's this other beautiful man who's part of my life. And um, while I was writing my book, I'll just that similar. Scott was so fabulous and supportive as he is, and I could like be writing all day, late, and he would show up, and I would always look at him and say, "Oh, yay! Here it's my alive husband." I've like spent the day with my dead husband. Here's my alive husband. Thank
Yeah.
goodness.
Yes. I totally get that. And I know that, like, the joy of that feeling, like, oh, here you are. And yeah, I just, you wrote about this in the book, though. I mean, not though, too, where you talked about, like, maybe is this a step backward that I'm dreaming about Kent when I'm with Scott? And then someone says to you, I think in your widow group, that grief is not linear, that, it's just not a straight line where you've moved forward and now you're over this and now you're on to this. So it's not a step back, right? And I love that you're looking at it as he's saying hello. This is how he visits or is still a part of your life, and his son's life, through you. Um, we are out of time. I had a couple more questions, but I just think this is such a beautiful story. I'm just going to leave it right there and really thank you for this interview. It's that I want to say it's been a joy, but I just learned so much. There's something about the way you discuss this that, even though this is really heavy subject matter and the parts of it, where we both welled up, there's sadness there, but there's a way that there's this free way that you discuss it. I don't feel like you're encumbered by anything. And that's really hopeful to someone like me who has yet to lose anybody, um, that is close to me, that I love, which is, I know, at like 60 years old, who has that, but I do right now. And I know it's coming.
Yeah.
But to see you and read about your journey and see this evidence of this woman who was buoyed until she could, buoy herself, um, and rode her way through into healing, and just like all this beautiful stuff. I really enjoyed talking to you about this, and I appreciate you sharing it with us.
Well, thank you so much. I love being here with you. And
Yeah.
it is, I mean, that's my whole, it's why I do what I do, right? That grief in its wholeness, there's beauty on the other side. You have to go through the hard part to get there, but there really can be beauty on the other side. And I was too young to stay in being widowed. I couldn't do that to Jake, and I couldn't do it to myself. And I'll always
Yeah.
be grateful that I took the path towards light and love, and got to be where I am and have this beautiful life.
Beautiful.
Thank you, Annie.
Yeah, thank you. Tell me where people can find you.
My book is The Fifth Chamber. It is available wherever you get your books. There it is. I love the cover. That drawing is done. The art is by a friend of mine. You can get it wherever you get your books. My website is just my name, anngudger.com. The podcast is Coffee, Grief, and Gratitude. And my daughter and I also run a monthly reading series around grief. And that is off. You can find that information on our Facebook page called Coffee and Grief Community, because we believe in coffee going with grief, apparently.
I love that. Thank you so much, Annie.
Thank you.
Thank you, Annie.